So hello, welcome to the video and welcome to the Norwegian breakaway and welcome to the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean. An unusual location, but it's an unusual video because I am today celebrating achieving 20,000 subscribers, a landmark I achieved on the exact same day as I landed in my 100th country. So that ended up being really quite a day. Now, a couple of times now I've invited you to leave me a question that you'd like me to answer in this celebration of reaching 20,000, and I will be answering those questions today from various places around the ship. I started the channel in lockdown. I was bored, I had nothing else to do, and I thought a few people might be interested in what I had to say. And fast forward 4, maybe 5 years, and 20,000 of you have subscribed, and I've had about 2.7 million views in total. So I had no idea we would ever get here. I'm thrilled we have, and thank you so much for sending in some really quite interesting questions. Hi, I'm Matt and this is Matt's Planet. I aim to entertain, educate and inspire with my travel adventures from planning to execution. I'll show you how you can travel in style for a lot less than you'd think. So subscribe so you can come with me. Now, Steve Morgan asks, what country am I most looking forward to visiting in 2025? And well, I've probably already visited it. I had a 3-country swing through Southern Africa last month, through South Africa, Namibia and Mauritius, and I was really looking forward to seeing all of them as they were all new to me. Probably most looking forward to South Africa, and Cape Town really didn't disappoint. Stay tuned to the channel as my reports on visiting those places will be along in the next month or 2 or 3. And a couple of questions about bucket lists, and I'm hoping it'll be very many years before I'm actually going to die, so I think it's a bit early in life to actually set one up. I would like to travel in all of the super premium first class cabins. La Première and Singapore Airlines do spring to mind, but it's not really something I've thought a great deal about, and I don't have a formal list that I'm working my way through. A couple of questions about whether I'll be flying and reviewing Etihad, and yes, I really would like to. They're just not in any of the major alliances, and I'm trying to focus on covering the airlines that make up those alliances, as they are the most accessible airlines for people to get on with points. Although I think you can get on Etihad using Aeroplan points from Air Canada. So it's not impossible that I might find myself on Etihad sometime in the future. But yes, I'd really like to cover them because I think they're a good product. A couple of questions about whether there's any airlines I definitely wouldn't fly. Well, I'm not going to be flying on Aeroflot or Belavia, which is Belarus's national airline, anytime soon for hopefully fairly obvious reasons. I wouldn't rule out an airline though because of its safety record, because even the dodgiest airlines are still extremely safe. I'm not a big fan of taking unnecessary risks, but I don't see flying, even in developing countries, to represent a great risk. You're still far more likely to be injured on the way to the airport than you are on the way out of the airport. But the channel's strategy is to talk about the major alliances, the places that you're able to spend any points that you accumulate, and that keeps me limited to pretty mainstream airlines and will keep me there for some time yet. Other reviewers will do the crazy airlines that you've never heard of, and they're more than welcome to do that, but I'm trying to give you some tangible consumer information that you can actually use. And another really good question, what's my favourite experience of an ex-airline? And I thought about this for a few minutes, and the answer actually is Laker Airways. That was an airline back in 70s or the 80s which really opened up discount transatlantic travel. They got squashed out of the market by the established players, as so many startups do, but for a couple of years they gave people like me and my family a cost-effective way of getting to the US, of experiencing Florida and the theme parks and places that you only would ever have dreamed of going to had you only had the option of flying in super expensive British Airways or other mainline carriers. So Laker Airways was quite fun to be aboard, and they gave you opportunities and told you what was actually possible, which many other airlines have since copied. Quite a flurry of questions along the lines of best airline, best crew, best lounge, etc, 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 and I can't really answer all of those questions in this video because it would be hours long, and I first invited you to ask me questions in my Matty's Awards video, where that was sort of the topic and the purpose of the video. I think, to answer it at a very, very high level, I don't have an answer to any of them. I don't think I've found the best airline or the best crew. There are still some excellent airlines that I need to travel on and review. If I did know the answer to all of those questions, it's probably time for me to stop flying because I've sort of completed the game. So I hope I don't ever have an opinion on some of these things, because it means there'll still be more adventures to have, there'll still be more experiences to have. And a question about what's the most overrated airline and lounge and so on and so forth. And overrated is an interesting question. I never found my experiences in the Concorde room or in the Al Safwa in Doha to live up to the expectations I perhaps had. So in that definition, they're both overrated, but that's based on an expectation that is probably unreasonably high. When it comes to airlines, the one that springs to mind is Singapore Air. I did the world's longest flight with them and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't where I thought it would be in terms of service. I was a bit weird in how I approached it, as you probably come to expect from watching my videos, but they didn't react particularly well to it, and it ended up being a good but a slightly disappointing experience, such that Singapore Air didn't really feature anywhere, I think, in that list of awards that I gave out at the end of last year. And a question about premium economy and whether I think it is worth the upgrade. The short answer is probably not. I have reviewed Virgin and BA's premium economy across the Atlantic, which I think covers the high points of the offering. If you can get it on a redemption, that's often not a great premium versus an economy seat, so probably would be worth it. But if you're paying cash, they're often twice the price, and it's hard to justify paying that much more for just a couple of extra inches of legroom, particularly if you have status and you can get even better legroom back in economy by getting an emergency exit row. And the food may be a little bit better, but it's not that much better and not really much better to write home about in my experience. And a question nobody asked, which is which video made you feel like the biggest goober when you were recording it? And the answer is this one. And another excellent question from the very well named Jet Tyler. Do I have any plans to do any challenge videos on the channel? Well, I have thought about them, and I have got a couple of ideas of things that I could do, but there's two things that are holding me back. The first is that most of the challenge videos I've watched, with a few exceptions, feel contrived. For example, I love Noel and I do enjoy his videos, but he did a consecutive lowest cost flight video where his wife picked his flights for him, and he ended up in Nepal. And in the couple of days after arriving in Nepal, he went on to do the world's most dangerous flight to the world's most dangerous airline and took the helicopter up to Everest Base Camp. And I sort of refuse to believe that he would have been able to organise those things immediately on arriving in Kathmandu without any previous knowledge that he was going to be there. So it felt a little bit fixed. And I would only ever do a video like that if there was a genuine way that I could prove to you that it was a genuine challenge and hadn't been fixed. And the other reason I'm a little hesitant is that a successful video has to introduce some level of jeopardy to the video for it to feel exciting. And my content is all about avoiding jeopardy. It's about minimizing risk. It's about having as good a time as you can with as little risk and as little cost as possible. And if I do challenge videos where I'm sort of creating artificial jeopardy and whether I can achieve it, that doesn't really feel authentic to what I'm trying to do elsewhere on the channel. So I may do one or two just to see if the experience actually works for me and whether the experience works in a video. But those are the two reasons why I haven't done one yet. So it's a very good question. Thanks for asking it. So hi, it's me, George, asked probably enough questions to fill an entire video on their own. So I'll answer a couple of them quite briefly. And what have I learned from my traveling? Well, that's an easy one. I'm not going to give you 5 things, but the one thing that I think is most important is to get out there and see a place for yourself. Example being Saudi Arabia. Always wanted to go. I got a little bit of heat in the comments for having gone, but it was a fascinating place. I'm so pleased I went. I'm so pleased I saw it with my own eyes, and it really confounded my expectations. So don't necessarily believe what you see on the news, don't necessarily believe what you see on social media. Get out and see a place for yourself. And I'll quickly touch on the regret question, and that's something I try not to have. I might make bad decisions, but I try not to regret any of them, and I try to make the most out of them. And I think being positive about these sorts of things is probably not a bad way to be. And George also very wisely asks why I still live in the UK when I could live somewhere else. And there were a couple of other questions on this topic. Why did I leave Australia? And the great Steve Marsh also asked, would I ever live overseas again? Well, I left Australia and I never really decided to leave. I got offered a 3-month secondment to a sister business of the company I was working for in the United States and ended up staying there for about 7 years. At the end of that, I had the choice of going to Australia and going to the UK, and circumstances meant I went back to the UK, and I'm still in the UK now because I care for my mum, who needs a bit of help in her golden years, let's call them. And as to Steve's question, will I live overseas again? I have lived in the UK, I've lived in the US, I've lived in Australia, I lived in Singapore, and I lived in the Philippines, and yes, I would certainly like to live somewhere else overseas again. Back when we were in the EU, I had a number of very interesting opportunities that I could execute quite easily. It's a bit more tricky now, and it's a bit more tricky again, given I have a fairly difficult diagnosis which makes private insurance quite tricky to get. But as and when the time is right, I will look at options of living overseas again, because I think the world is a big place and it is a bit of a shame to confine yourself to just one corner of it if you don't have to. Here's an interesting question. Has having multiple passports ever been helpful for me? And the answer is probably not really. It gives you more countries of residence. When Britain was in the EU, along with an Australian passport, I had quite an interesting array of countries that I could live in, but not so much these days. There are potentially a country or two around the world where having an Aussie passport is better than having a British passport when it comes to tourist access and vice versa, but I've never found myself having a great advantage from having multiple citizenships. So how do I pay for my flights? And I do pay for all of my flights, as any good flight reviewer should, although I have been offered my first free flight, and it is very tempting to accept it, let me tell you. But I promise you now that if I do accept free flights, I will make it abundantly clear that I am doing so, and I will establish with the airline, as I have in this instance, that I will maintain full editorial control over my content, and they're very happy with that indeed. They're actually quite excited to see what I have to say. But historically I've paid probably a mix of 50-50 between points and cash, only ever paying cash when I think there's good value to be had. And I always disclose at the end of the video how I've paid for a flight and what it precisely cost me. So transparency is important, and over time I think it'll probably stay a mix between cash and points. And as the channel gets a little more successful, I can start to consider paying greater amounts of cash for more difficult to achieve experiences, such as perhaps with Etihad. A follow-up question about eSIMs and insurance. Now, I've only very recently upgraded my phone to one that is able to cope with eSIMs, and they are actually fantastic. I have an affiliate relationship with Airlines, and I am going to feature them in a couple of upcoming videos. I'm not sponsored by them, but I do rate them highly, and I will recommend them to you. When it comes to insurance, it's not a topic I particularly enjoy. I never enjoyed it when I was in the finance profession, and the difficulty is that if I talk about it, it's going to be very country specific. So I don't really enjoy it. It's a difficult topic to cover in a video, but to answer the question directly, I buy an annual travel insurance policy in the UK. It cost me about 120 quid. My recent diagnosis pretty much doubled the price, but I still think that's pretty good value considering the cover that it gives me. Here's a good one, written before the changes were announced at the end of last year. Does BA have what it takes to get back to being the best airline in the world, or perhaps even the best airline in Europe? Well, operationally, when it comes to their product and their crews, they probably do. I think they're going very much in the right direction. There's the occasional howler and the occasional own goal, such as Brunchgate. But to be honest, I don't perhaps care so much now, because they've told me they don't really want my business, and I'm happy to listen to them and give it to someone else. So potentially a massive own goal, or maybe the consultants and the senior management at BA understand their business far better than any of us do. But so far it's been an entirely negative response to those changes, something I have talked about in a previous video. And you know what? I will continue to fly them, but only when I do it on my terms, only when I'm getting a good value redemption. And my last few experiences with BA have been very positive. So yes, I think they have the potential to get there, but they need their management to be pulling in the same direction as their frontline crew. And currently, I don't think they are. A question about what are the best Star Alliance redemptions for this year, which is actually quite a tricky one to answer succinctly, but I would direct you to my Air Canada Aeroplan video, where you get access to all of the Star Alliance airlines, often at quite reasonable prices. And if you pick an airline that is in a developing country, they seem to value the cash they get out of a redemption booking more highly than some of the developed country airlines, and there are some great bargains to be had and some very interesting destinations to explore. Good question here. Do I still think Aegean is the best Star Alliance frequent flyer program to chase? Now, I haven't redone the exercise that underpinned my original recommendation because it takes a long time. But from what I've seen, I don't think there's any reason to suggest that Aegean isn't the best to pursue still. It never was the easiest to get status with. You can get the quick hit of a status match and get status very, very rapidly with a couple of airlines. I think Turkish still has a pretty permanent status match offer running. But the question really is retaining it. Yes, you can have status for a year, but if you want to maintain it indefinitely, then Aegean is certainly still the best. I've changed the rules since I made my video such that if you don't travel at all on Aegean, it's now equally difficult to maintain status as it is on some of the Lufthansa Group airlines. But if you are able to get 4 flights a year in with Aegean, it is really quite easy to maintain that gold status, something I am continuing to do and something I will make a video about in the future. And a very good question from long-time supporter Linny. Do I still watch the safety briefings and the safety videos? Well, yes, I do. A couple of reasons. Firstly, I want to feature them in the video, so I want to pay attention to them and offer some sort of insight or comment or a joke about them. But secondly, I always feel a little bit bad from the crew. Their job is to keep us all safe, and if everybody just ignores them when they're giving a safety demonstration, it just feels like they're undervalued for what they're actually there to do. So I always make a point of watching, of paying attention, even though I pretty much know all of those demonstrations off by heart myself these days. And I try and make eye contact as well, so they know that at least one person in the cabin is watching. But yes, I do know how to put on pretty much every safety belt. I do know there is a whistle and a light for attracting attention. And I probably don't need to be told that absolutely every single time I fly, but I think it's courteous and appropriate to pay some attention to it whenever you are actually flying. And 2 slightly more light-hearted questions to finish with. Barry asked if he could be the best subscriber, and Barry, yes, you can. And long-time and very entertaining contributor FatCat747 asked if they could be the best cat. Absolutely. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed that. Some interesting questions in there, and I hope you enjoyed the answers. I think the next logical landmark to shoot for this sort of video is 50,000 subscribers. I think that's going to take quite a while to reach, though. I don't think my content is the sort that's ever going to get me to 1 million subscribers, and very few people who do aviation content have got anywhere close to that number. And I may not even get to 100,000 because, again, it's quite a niche subject that I talk about. But I value each and every one of you. I'm so proud of the community that I've been able to build, and I really enjoy interacting with every one of the comments that I receive. And I really enjoy making these videos and hope to continue to do so for many years to come. So thank you so much for your support, for every like, for every comment, for every view. It really does mean a huge amount to me. And here's to the next 30,000 subscribers. Cheers. So it's several hours and several drinks later, and I realised that it wouldn't be a Matt's Planet video without a cheers. So here's to 20,000 subscribers. Only Prosecco because the drinks package doesn't stretch to champagne on this particular cruise, but still very nice.